Hello, welcome back. I'm Juliana and today we're going to be making a chocolate layered cake. So this is one of my favorite recipes for cake and it might be a bit longer of a recipe, but it's worth it. So, okay, our first step is to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. And then while that's heating, we're going to mix all our ingredients. So we're going to start with wet ingredients. So here I have half a cup of vegetable oil, and then I have 2 eggs. The recipe says room temperature, but honestly I don't think it makes that big of a difference. And then 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I just use vanilla imitation. It has the same exact taste, and I just use 1 cap per teaspoon. Okay, now we're gonna mix that up. Alright, so this recipe does include buttermilk. But if you don't have buttermilk like I do, there is a substitute for it, so I'm going to show you how to do that now. For this substitute, you need lemon juice or vinegar, and you need milk. So we're going to take the lemon juice and we're going to add 2 teaspoons to our measuring cup. And then you're going to add your milk until it reaches 1 cup because we need 1 cup of buttermilk. And then you're just going to let this sit for about 5 minutes so that it curdles and it has the same sort of flavor as actual buttermilk. Alright, so meanwhile we're going to mix up our dry ingredients. So in here I have 1 3/4 cup of flour, and now we're going to add 1 3/4 cup of white sugar and 3/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. And then we're also going to add 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And I like to use the top of the box to like flatten it out. And then as well as 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And the same concept, I just flatten it out. Alright, and then we're also going to add about 1 teaspoon of salt, and I always just like to add a bit less than the actual recipe. Okay, we're gonna whisk that all together. And I like to shake around the bowl while I do this because it helps so that all the ingredients are being distributed throughout the bowl while you're mixing, because there usually is flour or stuff stuck at the bottom that doesn't get mixed. So you just want to make sure to mix that as well. And if you want to get rid of the clumps, you can just like sift in the ingredients if that's your preference. So a great addition to any chocolate cake recipe is like espresso or coffee because it richens the flavor of the chocolate, and don't worry, you don't really taste the coffee. So if you have espresso powder, you can add like 2 teaspoons of it to your dry ingredients and mix it in. I don't have espresso powder, but we are going to use hot coffee or strong coffee. So you can either use both or just one of them. So if you're going to use one of them, I would use the coffee. Alright, so our buttermilk substitute had sat for like 5 minutes. So now we're going to add it to our wet ingredients. Just give it a quick mix. Okay, now we're going to add the dry ingredients to our wet ingredients. I always prefer adding dry to wet just because it's easier to mix. So I usually add it in like 3 or 4 parts depending on how much dry ingredients I have. And make sure not to over mix it. So just mix it until it's combined. Now I've mixed all my dry into my wet ingredients, and you may notice that your batter is pretty thick. That's okay because now we're going to add in our coffee. So you typically want to use stronger coffee because it adds a better flavor. So this is about 1 cup or 8 ounces of coffee. So I'm just going to pour that in there. I'm going to mix that. And just mix it slowly because you don't want to spill. And then I just mix from the middle and slowly go out. Alright, so now our batter is done and it's considerably thinner, but that's what we want. So yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna prepare our cake pans. So it may be better to use 2 cake pans, but if you have 1, it's fine because you can just cut it in half. So yeah, so here I have 2 9-inch cake pans. You can use 8.5. It'll just be a bit smaller. So now we're gonna prepare our pans. So I prefer springboard pans because for me it's just easier to like take out the cake when it's done. But if you don't have a springboard pan, you can just like hit it out of it. But you just have to wait till the cake completely cools. So there's a little trick I like to use when lining my cake pans. And so I just use parchment paper for the bottom and then I spray the sides. So you may be wondering, how do you make like a circular shape? So that's what I'm going to teach you. Okay, so you're just going to get your parchment paper and cut it. And then you're going to fold it diagonally, not all the way across, until the edge meets the bottom of the paper. So basically I just took it and I took the edge and I brought it up to the top. And I'm making sure that this corner here is completely folded. And then I just fold it on that edge. And then I'm gonna cut off this excess part right here. And so what this does is that it creates a perfect square. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And then what you're gonna do is you're just gonna keep folding it in half. Like so. And fold it on this corner. So you should have something that looks like this. And then you're going to take your cake pan and you're sort of going to like put the tip in the middle. So like this. And then you're going to mark where the pan ends. So you can use a pen or you could just cut it. So my pan ends around there. Also, when you're folding it, make sure that the tip is like where all the folds are and not where the ends are, because when you go to cut it, it'll be like, it won't be a circle, it'll be like half a circle. So yeah, so just cut it along the line you made and kind of cut like a curve to match the circle. And then when you open it, you have a perfect circle. And it should fit the bottom of your pan like so. So what I do to make sure that it sticks is I spray the bottom of my pan. If you want, you don't have to use parchment paper, but I think it's better because it's more of a guarantee that your cake's gonna come out of the pan and it's not gonna stick. Okay, so after I've done the bottom, I'm just gonna spray all around the edges. And spray it generously. Alright, so I have one cake pan prepared, and I'm gonna do the same thing to the other one. Now both my pans are prepared, and it's time to divide the batter. So I would just give it a quick stir because some of the coffee might have settled to the top. So just stir it a little bit. And then you can go ahead and like get rid of the whisk because we're gonna switch over to a spatula. Okay, so now the way I divide my batter is I just do it little by little. Like I don't pour all of it immediately. So then I kind of just like eyeball it. And if you're using one pan, I would just go ahead and pour it all into that pan. And we're going to use the spatula to get the rest out. Alright, so now I'm just going to give these a quick tap so all the air bubbles come to the surface. And then we're going to bake them. So something I like to do is I put my cakes onto one rack and then I put a pan underneath it just in case that any of the batter drips through, because sometimes with these pans it leaks a little bit. So yeah, that's just what I like to do. Alright, so now both my cakes are done baking. I've already taken one of them out. And if you're wondering, this is just a cake turntable, but you could just put it on like any plate that's big enough. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how I take out this one. So since this is a springboard, it's a lot easier to take out, so I don't have to like flip it and hit it. So I'm just going to undo this. I'm going to take this off. And then I usually like to get like a plate or something that's flat, and then I put it on top and I just flip it like so. And then so now it's really easy for me to take this off. And when you're putting the knife under, try to go as like high, like as much as to the pan as you can, because remember there's that parchment paper under there that we can take off. So I'm just gonna carefully take it off and make sure that your cake is completely cool before doing this, or else it will most likely fall apart. Okay, so now we have successfully taken out our cake. And most cakes, when you take them out, they will have like a mound or something. So if your cake does have a mound, go ahead and just like, I would suggest using like a bread knife, and try to like as evenly as you can just cut straight and like take the mound off. But both my cakes baked pretty flat, so I don't have to really cut anything. So now it's time to make the frosting and actually stack our cakes on top of each other. So I'm going to show you how to make that. Alright, so for this recipe we're going to be making a chocolate buttercream. Buttercream is typically has a lighter taste than other frostings. I kind of prefer it because it balances out the sweetness. So let's get started. So we need about 1 1/4 cups of butter, which is 2.5 sticks. It's unsalted butter, and we just soften that, so you can just put it in the microwave for like 30 seconds. So we're going to put that in our bowl, and I do suggest, if you have a mixer, to use a mixer when making frosting, but you can do it by hand as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna use a whisk, and then it might be hard at first to mix it, but just keep mixing it until it gets like light and fluffy. Okay, so now I've beat my butter, and it's like, it should kind of look like frosting. So now we're gonna add in 3.5 cups of powdered sugar. And I know that's a lot of powdered sugar, but we need to make a lot of frosting if we want enough to assemble the cake and then also have it for the outside. So I'm just gonna slowly incorporate this. You may want to have a spatula by you as well to like clean your whisk. Okay, so for now, I know it's not fully whisked and it's very dry, but we're gonna add in our other ingredients. Alright, so now I'm gonna add in 3/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder. And I'm also gonna add about 3 to 5 tablespoons of half and half. You can also use heavy cream, or you can use normal milk. I'm just using what I have. I'm just gonna add 5 because my mixture looks kind of dry. Okay. So now I'm going to mix all that together. So again, this would be easier with like an electric mixer, but it's fine. So your frosting is going to be pretty clumpy and dry at first, but it's fine because we can also we can always adjust it afterwards. But it's actually coming together, so I don't think it will be an issue. As you can see, it's starting to become frosty. Okay, and then we're also gonna add about 1/4 teaspoon of salt, or you can just add like a pinch of salt. And we're gonna add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And you may want to just switch to a spatula at this point because it might be a bit hard to mix with a whisk. So as you can see, at first it was pretty dry, but once we fully mix it, it's a pretty good consistency. So now we have our frosting. If you want, you can taste test it and see if it needs anything. So yeah, now that we have our frosting, we can assemble our cake. Okay, so as you can see, I already have one of my cakes on my turntable. So now I'm just going to take like a scoop of frosting. And I have my icing spatula over here. And I'm just going to make a nice even layer over my cake. Try to get as little crumbs in your frosting as you can. So like pick up your icing spatula as you do it. Okay. And get it all the way to the edge of the cake. And then if you need more frosting, go ahead and add more. So I just like to turn my thing as I do it. If you're just using a plate, you can rotate the plate. Okay, so now we have a nice even layer of frosting, and we can go ahead and put our second layer. So this might be a bit difficult, so it's really important that your cakes are really cold so they don't fall apart. So I'm just gonna turn it over, and then I'm gonna slowly put it on my other cake. And try to put the flattest side of the cake on top so that it's, you know, nice and flat. And as you can see, some of the crumbs from the bottom of the cake got left behind on the plate, so that's why I put that side of the cake down, so that way there's no crumbs in my frosting and that it's a nice and smooth cake. Okay, so that bit does take some practice. It might look difficult, but it gets easier. So this step is completely optional, but I still like to do it because I'm a perfectionist. So I'm just gonna take like a bread knife or any sharp knife. I'm gonna cut like around my cake so that the edges are nice and flat and there's no like curvature to it. So I'm just gonna stick my knife there, and I'm gonna slowly go around my cake and cut the rims off. And you can do this step before layering them as well, but I'm just doing it now so I can see where I need to cut so that they're both even. So I cut off all the edges, and now as you can see, it's nice and flat all the way around. So now all the next step is called crumb coating. And although it's optional, I really do suggest it because it helps lock in all those crumbs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take like a really thin layer of frosting, and I'm just going to spread it really thinly all around my cake. So this step isn't to like actually frost the cake, it's just to lock everything in. So as you can see, I'm like really spreading it out thin. And I'm going to do this all around the cake, including the top. Okay, so I fully coated my cake and I went ahead and refrigerated it for about 15 to 20 minutes, or until you can touch it and like the frosting doesn't lift or anything. So now as you can see, the cake is all nice and cold and everything is like really stiff, which is kind of what you want. So now we can finally frost our cake. So I would go ahead and make a bit more frosting because I don't think the original amount is enough. So I went ahead and made like another recipe. So now I'm gonna start with the top of my cake. I'm just gonna put like that much frosting. You don't want too thick of a layer of frosting because it is very sweet. So you just want enough to like nicely cover the cake. So I'm gonna start spreading it around and kind of using the same method as I was with the creme coat. And now with the creme coat, it's you won't actually need as much frosting because you already had that layer underneath. Then bring it out all the way to the edge, and if you need more frosting, add more. And I'm really being careful not to get any frosting inside, any crumbs inside my frosting, because we want a nice and clean look. And once it gets in there, it's really hard to get out. Yeah. And I'm gonna worry about smoothing it out later, but for now I'm just going to make sure that I have enough frosting all around. Okay, so now that the top is all nice and like covered, I'm gonna start on the sides. So I'm just gonna get a big dollop and I'll put it on the side, and I'm just gonna go back and forth with the frosting like so. And I'm gonna do this all the way around my cake. So yeah, just that back and forth motion. For your frosting, you don't want it to be too thick, because then it'll be harder to spread. But then if it's too thin, it's gonna like fall or like drip, and you don't want that. So yeah, just make sure your frosting is a pretty good consistency. So yeah, I'm just starting by making sure all my sides are covered first, and then I'm gonna worry about smoothing it out later. And make sure you cover the top and the bottom as well. If you want, you could also make the outside frosting a different color, like you could make it white, or you can make it white and just color it with food coloring. If you don't want chocolate frosting, it's literally the same recipe, just without the cocoa powder. So just if you want to get more creative, you have your options open to you. Okay, so I went around the whole cake and I made sure that there were no bare areas. So now that all my areas are nice and frosted, I'm going to work on smoothing it out and getting a really nice finish. So I'm going to start with the top. There are a few techniques to making it really smooth. If you want, you could like do a swirl kind of pattern. It's really up to you. I'm just going to go around my cake. And it does not have to be perfect, especially if you're going to decorate it, because people are going to focus more on the decorations than how smooth your cake is. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the top. So as you can see, there's kind of like excess frosting going off the top. So what I'm going to do is just take that frosting and just smooth it out with the sides of my cake. And as you can see, I'm just doing one motion with my spatula to get a really nice clean finish. So yeah, the better the consistency of your frosting, the easier this is to get really smooth. If you want, you can also get like a rectangular sort of flat edge and like just go around the whole cake with it. But I find that the icing spatula works just as well. And remember to apply even pressure to all the sides of the cake. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with how smooth my cake is. So now I think it's time to decorate, my favorite part. So let's get on that. Okay, so for frosting the cake, you obviously need a bag to put your frosting in. You could honestly just use a Ziploc bag, or you could get like a piping bag. There are also reusable piping bags you could use, but I'm just going to use a Ziploc bag for today. So you're going to take one of the tips of the bag and you're going to just cut like a little bit off. Let me go closer. So just like that much off from the top. And you can cut more if it's still too small, but you want to cut less before cutting a lot, because if you cut too much you can't go back. So yeah, this is too small, so I'm just going to cut a bit more. So take your desired tip and just put it through the bag and put it through the hole. And then make sure it's pretty tight. I think I made my hole too big, but it's okay because there's still the other side of the bag. So yeah. That's another benefit to Ziploc bags, is that you have two sides. So that's better. So now that it's really nice and tight on there, you want to get yourself like a tall cup. And this is just a easier trick to getting your frosting in there. And you just open the Ziploc bag over the cup. And so now it's a lot easier to get your frosting in there, and it's also a lot less messy. So yeah, I'm just gonna take my frosting. I'm gonna dump it in here. Yeah, that's also, if you wanna decorate, I also suggest making more frosting for that. So the other recipe that I made was enough for frosting and now decorating. If you want, you can just add the rest in, since you're not really going to be frosting your cake anymore. Okay, and then so once it's all filled, you're just going to put it back up, and you're going to bunch it up and twist it. If you want, you could also take like a hair tie, but I find that it's better to twist it just to let some of the air out, and so your piping bag won't explode. So I'm going to do kind of a simple design, and I'm going to do a border around the edge and also like swirls on the top. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So this is the tip I'm using right now. As you can see, the spikes are much smaller and closer together, which creates that like scalloped look. But then you also have this tip where the spikes are much bigger. And this is the one you more typically use for like the swirls on top. But just so it's easier, I'm just going to keep the tip that I'm using now. For the border, I usually do the border first. So you're just going to stay in one spot and drag it. And so you want to put more pressure in the beginning and then loosen it up. So yeah, the trick to this is really just putting the frosting in one place and then dragging. And it gives you a really nice border. So I'm going to do this around the whole cake and then I'll be back. Okay, so now as you can see, I have a really nice border around my cake. And so yeah, if you did this with a different color, it would definitely stand out more. But since I already made my frosting chocolate, I can't really dye it much after. So that's fine. So now, with my remaining frosting, I'm going to make swirls on top. If you want, you can like switch out your piping tip for a different tip. Like the tip I use for this one, the spikes are like very close together and small. If you wanted to change it for the swirls, you could use the one with the larger spikes. Okay, so I'm gonna try to make the swirls pretty evenly around my cake. So kind of imagine that you're cutting your slices, like, and then try to put a swirl on each one. So I just hold it like this, and I go in a swirl like that. If you wanted with this tip, you could also just like hold it in one place and go up if you want to do something easier. This is also good for like cupcakes if you want to do that. So I'm pretty happy with my swirls. And now, if you want, you can add like sprinkles or, I don't know, other decorations on the sides. I think I'm going to add sprinkles, so I'll be right back. Alright, so here I have some like little gold stars, so that's what I'm going to be using. But I also want to show you like the rainbow sprinkles. Another thing you could do if you don't want to do a border, you could take the sprinkles and kind of like put it into your palm and like pat it on the sides. So that creates a really cool look too. Or you could just like sprinkle it on top. Either one works. But I'm going to be using the stars. So I'm just going to put one onto each frosting thing I have here. And then I'm also going to put it like some of them on the border. And I'm also going to put one in the center. Okay, so my cake is all done, and I'll show you close up now. Alright, so here it is. As you can see, it's pretty simple, but it's still cute. And if you want, you could also like search up pictures of cake designs and try doing those, but I just went for a simple look this time. Right, so now we're all done and you're all free to finally eat the cake, which is the best part. When you're storing this, I would store it in the fridge, but probably you could leave it out too, that's fine. I would get like, if you have like a really big bowl that's big enough to cover it, I would use something like that. But yeah, I hope you had fun and enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye!